Hey guys, BrittoMan945 here. Welcome back to another video. I'm once again joined by my dad.
Hey there.
And today, in this video, I finally made my dad make a top 10 games of all time list, which is really hard for him because there's a tons of games that he's played that he hasn't remembered. But I kind of made it like my personal side mission project, whatever you want to call it, to make him make the list. I do it by listing out a ton of games by year and finding out which ones he played and then having him pick a game by year, and then from there he made his top 10 list. And so quite a few of the games on this list I never heard of before. So I'll hold the list actually, and I'll
Okay.
I'm gonna kind of ask you about each one.
A bit of background. I have been playing computer games since the early 80s.
Yeah.
So-
My dad was born in 1974. So if you're expecting a lot of Nintendo games or even popular games, my dad probably has not played them.
Well, yeah, a little bit
unless they're more recent. Unless they're more
RPG
recent.
focused. So yeah, I had an Atari computer in the 80s, a PC in the 90s. Flirted a little bit with the original Nintendo. Had a PlayStation 2 and more recently an Xbox, but almost heavily PC gamer.
Okay.
So that does influence.
So
the
the
list.
first game is the one on here that I've never heard of at all. What is Eye of the Beholder?
So Eye of the Beholder is a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Is it inspired by the universe like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights?
So this predates the Forgotten Realms. Well, no, I guess this was the first Forgotten Realms game. Now that I think about it, because it's set in the sewers of Waterdeep. So this was right around when they're introducing, the Forgotten Realms, which Baldur's Gate is part of that.
Okay.
The original D&D world that Gary Gygax created was called Greyhawk.
Okay.
And then they came out with the Forgotten Realms later as part of it. And the original D&D games were the classic, what they call gold box games, which were, like a lot of those early games from that era, like the mid to late 80s were...
Did this come out in that, or was it early 90s?
It might have been right around 1990 or 92, somewhere in there.
That part's not super
sure.
important.
But this was impactful because this was, first of all, it was one of the first games with, and depending on your knowledge of gaming history, it had what they called VGA graphics, 256 color graphics. Like in the olden days,
wow.
We had 4 color and 16 colors on PC games, right? So this was when you think about amazing ray traced games of today, this is sort of that equivalent, but in the 1990 or 92 or whatever it was. And but this was impactful because earlier games were all turn based, right?
So
this was not.
Oh, okay. How did the combat work then?
So it was on a timing system, right? It basically time just kept going by, and if you
like Final Fantasy VII,
not so much with the time gauge and all that, but basically just time is going on in the background, and if you do nothing, the monsters are going to keep swinging at you.
Yeah.
And you basically when you clicked your weapon on one of your characters, it would turn gray for a little bit. And then it would turn active again when it was they had the ability to strike again. So you're basically clicking in time, and then to cast spells, you had to quickly move to cast whatever spell you wanted to cast. Mm-hmm. But you could also the concept of kiting monsters. I don't know if you know what that is in a video game.
I don't.
That's where you keep distance and fire at them from a distance.
I didn't know that was called kiting.
Yeah, but I believe the term might have originated with some of the early MMOs like EverQuest. But don't hold me to that one. But that was the concept. To beat the game, you had to manage the dungeon and move your characters back and far away, and then fire and it was
So
It was a lot.
so you have like fond memories of that game, which is
Yeah,
why
and,
you put it
and
on
there's
the
some
list.
replayability to it. Like, even though the graphics obviously are a little dated today, that's a challenging mechanic that they really haven't reproduced since.
Okay, so number 9 is a game that I have much higher in my own personal list at number 3, and that is Star Wars: The Old Republic.
So, of course, this is the MMO Star Wars.
Yes, he has been playing the game a lot longer than me since like when 2013, I think you
Oh
told
my
me.
gosh. When did I first played it? No, maybe like 2012.
2012. Okay,
Yeah.
so the game came out in 2011. So like very OG player versus myself. I only started playing the game in 2020. So he's seen a lot more of the game than I have. But I want to hear why you love the game.
Well, I mean, as far as MMOs go, I mean, it's not really your. I mean, I know everyone loves their World of Warcraft or whatever, but the thing that really set like Swoter, as we all call it, that play it, because no one wants to like say the whole word out.
Yeah.
But it was the story, like the depth of the
yes.
stories
Yes.
that are in the game. I mean, you have 8 different class stories that you can play, and then they came back with an amazing sort of like where it sort of came back together in I guess that was like the version 3 or 4, or I don't remember exactly when it
had
all
several
released.
like DLC expansions that came out like across the different years. There was the one. What was the planet with the huts on it?
McKeb.
McKeb. That was it. That was the first one. That was okay. And then they did the Shadow of Revan stuff with like where you go to Rishi and then Yavin 4. That was fantastic. And then of course the cream of the crop, which is probably like the best story content in any video game I've ever played. It was like the Fallen Empire and Eternal Throne DLCs, which just featured such incredibly rich characters. And the thing about the game is there's also so much content.
Well, yeah, and it was a pretty impactful, I think, in when you mentioned those last two, because those actually had those sort of like world changing decisions where you could alienate certain companions, and they were like gone, like you wouldn't get them anymore.
I've had playthroughs where that happened, like a certain companion, because of decisions I made, just like
light side, dark side,
yeah.
and whether they like that or don't like that or whatever. And then even after that, when they had the Crisis on Umbar, where it was like
I totally forgot about that.
a major character like becoming a double agent, and you have no idea. Like when you first play through it, you're like, "Is this guy really turned on me?"
Oh my God.
After all these,
you literally just bring back memories of me playing the game.
So yeah, I mean this is
so...
it's just a fantastic game from that angle. I can't really speak to the classical MMO parts to it, because while I was in a guild for a while and I did do some of the operations, which are raids or whatever in the game, I didn't do them in any other any other MMO to really compare and contrast, like how good are these or whatever. But just from the story, I mean, it's just a fantastic game in that regard.
And I mean, there's so many other things we can talk about. Obviously, we have to keep moving through the list. But just my favorite thing I wanted to mention is just the fact that like you could do all of that content and more, like much more, because there are tons of planets that have tons of rich side quests to them.
Oh yeah, hundreds of hours of content,
and that's just like the single player stuff. Like
right,
we're the types of games that we play. Very limited, if none at all, exposure to multiplayer play, because I think we just prefer single player games. All that stuff that we mentioned is just single player content. There's like twice, 3 times as more available if you're doing like multiplayer content, which is the most insane part to me. So number 8, Ultima 7.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Ultima series by themselves is, I mean, it's but it's like Hall of Fame type stuff,
now,
right?
this in Wizardry, I guess, which is number 7 on this list. Like, these are 2 series that I had never heard of in my life till you mentioned them to me. So, like, could you explain what the premise behind both of these game series are? Because I know, like, nothing about it.
Well, obviously, the original Ultima series started out as some of that fare that you had in that these were like really spawned because of what the Apple II could do back in the day.
What I'm asking is, like, what's the setting? Is it like sci-fi? Is it?
Oh no, it's fantasy. These are fantasy games. So okay. Ultima is a fantasy game, and the original 1, 2, and 3 are kind of like standard fantasy fare. In fact, some things like concepts that that were introduced were the concept of the NPC, right? The non-player character, something that
that was introduced in these games.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. In the Ultima games, specifically Ultima 3, and the other thing was the concept of the mob. So do you know what a mob is in a game?
Yeah. As the traditional definition, yes.
So mobile monster. Well. Yeah. In those Ultima games, the way you knew that something was a monster was it moved. The NPCs did not, or if they did, they moved 1 or 2 squares, like behind the counter of the place where you bought your swords and shields and armor or whatever.
So what is it about Ultima 7 in particular that is your favorite?
So historically, the series 4, 5, and 6 were a trilogy. And they kind of broke ground with this concept of moral choices, right?
Oh.
It wasn't just go in the dungeon.
Kind of like the ones we just talked about from Sworder.
Well, right, but early on, like a lot of those early games, like the original Wizardries and Might and Magics and all of those, it was go through the dungeon and beat the bad guy.
Right.
Ultima introduced this concept of it's not so much about beating the bad guy, right? And so we get to Ultima 7 and
was this just like the culmination of all the things that made those games great? Basically?
Well, right. So to describe the effect, like, so this is the first time you're sitting down with this game. And remember back then there wasn't like YouTube or previews and all this stuff. You just knew that you were going to play this game because it was the next in the Ultima series, and you played 4, 5, and 6. You're like, this is awesome. So you sit down. Yeah. And you watch the opening credits, and it's like Ultima 7, and there's like some nice music, and like a butterfly lands on the, and then all of a sudden the screen starts to like, like go fizzy, and you're like, what's going on? And this red skull figure pops onto the screen, and I forget the whole dialogue and all that, but it turns out this character is called the Guardian. Right?
Is that like the main villain of the game?
Right. And he's like, I'm like, I've like taken this world that you thought you knew about. Because the idea behind Ultima was like your character like transports to this land of Ultima, which is sort of like Old English, Britannia is the name of the land.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But in 4, 5, and 6, like the beginning of 4 was always like you went to the gypsy's tent or wagon, and she did sort of a tarot thing, and you had to choose: are you just or are you humble? And you choose all these different scenarios,
which is like the characterization.
It's like the building of your character, and then if you depending on what you pick, you get to like different characters. Well. So Ultima 7 is like, then, first of all, like, now we're in this top-down, like, isometric, we're that era of games and graphics. And, the combat was like, it was all kind of almost real time because you would go into combat mode. Now, you could pause it at any point, issue a command, and then release it, and then, time would keep going. But that hadn't been done before, right? You might be more familiar with it, like if you've played more recent games. There's some that do that, where you're moving along, and then we'll get to that later in the list. A certain series, picked up on that, but Ultima 7 was kind of like the first then, and you're into this. You're teleported in this world, and everything's different than what you expected, and it's just the story in that is just one of the best that's ever been done in a game.
Okay, so I'm assuming a lot of the same things apply to Wizardry as a series.
Wizardry's a bit different,
but like the concepts of it being like an early RPG and like the moral choices, the first NPCs and the mobs and all these things that you talked about, right?
Right. So the first 5 Wizardries or so were kind of that same, conquer the dungeon and.
And then what was it, like 6 and 7 that introduced the moral choices thing?
Not so much moral choices, but started introducing more story elements. And now Wizardry 7 was sort of famous because one of the game designer was somebody whose name is D.W. Bradley, and this was like introducing like real story depth with a narrator and all of this stuff that you didn't have in a game before.
It's a little bit different than Ultima then.
Right, and then Wizardry 8 was it wasn't done by him, but it was the last game of that game made by that game company. But they put it all together, and to this date it's very playable, even, graphically doesn't even look that bad, and it's just really, in depth with what it's doing with the story and how you're progressing through it, and it's kind of an open world game, although it's sort of like
as open world as games like that could be in the 90s, I suppose.
It was level restricted, because if you wandered in the wrong area, you'd be crushed by something that was like 20 levels higher than you.
Yeah.
But you could go there, you just die.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of that linearity to it, but even today that exists. You can read a story; it's got to progress along the storyline.
So at number 6, the rest of these are going to be much more recent games.
Sure.
So people watching might be more familiar with this, such as one I have not played, but I'm definitely very familiar with because of various things that happened when it first came out, which is Cyberpunk 2077.
Right, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, well, why would you pick that one, say, over Witcher 3, maybe?
I don't know. I feel like the game has actually like kind of redeemed its popular status over the last couple years.
Well, they've so if you took the game that it exists today and had that as that content, and released that on day one instead of what they did.
Yeah,
it would have been,
it would be much more well received. But game executives rush things out. Very common story with the industries. Cyberpunk 2077 is not nearly the first time it's happened within the video gaming industry.
But I mean, as far as open world games, it's fantastic, and it's the ability to play in a style in terms of whether you want to be stealth or ranged combat, like melee combat. It supports all of it in incredible balance.
And it also has Keanu Reeves.
and he's playing a character named Johnny, which, if you know anything about Keanu Reeves, he has played a Johnny in so many different movies and games. Like, he doesn't even remember all the Johnnies he's been. So, I mean, the only minus to me for this game, and maybe why it might even be ranked lower on the list, is that the actual ending of the game is I personally didn't like at all.
Were there multiple endings to Cyberpunk 2077?
Technically, yes, but they were all bad, in my opinion. Now, this is my opinion.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Well, moving on to number 5. Diablo 4. The next 3 games are all games that came out this year.
Wow. 2023 was an insane year for the gaming industry.
Diablo 4.
But I think the 4th one is probably the best. I know that
preface by saying my dad, you played every single Diablo game. Been a pretty decently big fan of all the games.
Yeah, and I get that there's that contingent out there, especially once they remastered it. Diablo 2 will be like the best for them. I think Diablo 3 has a lot going for it, But I love the open world aspect of Diablo 4. I thought the campaign story was I thought it was really good. And I think the mechanics are classic Diablo. I know there's those out there that like complain about like character balance, and I am not a min maxer or like one who chases builds or anything like that. If you are, I get it. You have a different opinion, but for me, just the enjoyableness of playing the different characters and what they do ranks it in at number 5.
Yeah, number 4 is a game I still need to go back and play more of, but I've just had too much on my video gaming plate recently. That is Starfield.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are maybe not as high on it, but for me, I mean, it's. I think there's just a lot to this game that I don't know. There's something about being able to just almost play it in autopilot mode sometimes, but it also has the ability. I think what Bethesda really does well is some of those we call them side quest storylines. They're not the main storyline, but they're big storylines. That they've done, and those are excellent in this game. And I just like the ability to sit there and waste hours building your ship or building your outpost or all of this stuff that you can do.
I've seen a decent amount of reviews of this game, and a lot of them were saying that it's too big, it feels kind of empty, I guess. What do you say to, I guess, reviewers that had that kind of opinion of the game? How would you have a counter to that?
I wouldn't counter it per se, because there's definite truth there. Like when you create a gaming universe like that, and it's that large, and it's obvious, it's not secret that it's procedurally generated for a lot of it, then a lot of that procedurally generated stuff isn't necessarily that interesting to go and experience. I will say that, like I said, sometimes just going to a random planet and just doing, some of that stuff, even though it's not specially designed or set designed or whatever the terms are for that. But I get it. I think in, looking at it, it's maybe they made it a little too large. But that doesn't necessarily take away from the game. Just because it's out there doesn't mean that you have to go and, go through it.
That's true.
So, I mean, you say something is too big. Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't have to do with that part of it. That, like I said, those side quest lines, I think, they're fantastic. And a lot of the main hubs are really flushed out with side quests that are some that actually I enjoyed them. So and then next on it,
number 3 is a game that I am going to get to very, very soon. It's finally come to Xbox. One game of the year. Number 3 on this list, maybe for a really good reason, and that is Baldur's Gate 3.
I mean, this game. I mean, and I'll reserve the right to bump it up higher as more content comes out for it, potentially, because I'm sure that is going to happen in the future. But I mean, what? You have to be living under a rock in 2023 not to know how amazing this game is. So I don't really need to go into the depth of it. Obviously. The whole Baldur's Gate series is sort of legendary. I mean,
so that was what I was going to ask. Is the story connected to the first 2 games that were made by BioWare?
Only in sort of an Easter egg status.
So it's like a spiritual successor kind of thing.
More, yeah. I mean, certain parts or characters do show up that were part of the earlier games. Mm-hmm. If you've never played the earlier games, you wouldn't know and wouldn't care. But if you have played the earlier games, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool.
So you could play this game without playing the
other absolutely.
games. So can I ask, because I've talked to you a lot, obviously not with this video, because this is the first part you've been part of the channel, but I've talked to you quite extensively. about you really enjoy the first two games, right?
I mean, they're classics, and in fact,
So
in
I was gonna ask, like, what about this game makes it stand out as being so much better than everything that the first two games did really well?
well, like the second game is generally considered, like, from a story perspective, one of the legends of, the gaming world. But this one, from a story perspective, from the impact of decisions perspective, if that's the kind of game you want, where choices matter and actions matter, this game just it's just has so much of it, and there's so many. Like, the developers went down all the possible branches and the depths of, like, all the choices you could make and how all the different characters would respond in different situations. And I can't imagine, like, their design studio. It probably looks like one of those TV shows where the crazy guy has all the sticky notes on the board and all the strings going all over the place and stuff, because it's that deep, right? That much to it. Like, people are finding little nuggets that, it would take so many playthroughs just to find it all, because of all the different combinations, right? It's like
We're talking about, how do you rate the combat in this game? I haven't heard that talked about as much.
That it's as complex as 5th edition D&D combat can be.
Is it turn based?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Yes. It is as good as you're going to convert that system to, and because I have played the other 5th edition game that got a lot of buzz for how you converted the system, the Solasta game, and this is just like, not that was a bad game, but this is just like
much better.
So much beyond better than.
Did you even have any problems with the game, you think?
You mean like bugginess or error, like anything like that?
Anything like that. Things you didn't like about the story at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand how that could move higher. At number 2, I know you love the Tomb Raider game series, specifically the reboot one. What is it? Because Rise of the Tomb Raider is a second game,
right?
What is it about the second game in particular that makes it so far above either of the first or the third game for you?
The reasoning there for me is that it took the elements that we found introduced in that first game, and they just refined it and just made it so much smoother and better.
In terms of the combat and gameplay wise?
Maybe so much like how Laura gains skills and how, what she can do. I also thought that the story was fantastic with its,
Is it a continuation of the first game story?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Is it a game an RPG? Because I actually don't know anything about it.
No, it's a third person,
shooter?
Honestly, you'd be most familiar with the style in Jedi Fallen Order.
Okay, so kind of like action platform exploration type game? Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
But it had, it had the certain elements, like you would get into like puzzle solving when she would find a tomb that she would have to puzzle out how to figure out how to,
Yeah, hence the title of the game. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. And number 1 being Skyrim. I don't feel like, I feel like it's kind of earned its legendary game status because it's like, even though I have open world games in my top 10, such as The Witcher 3, that are higher than Skyrim, I still think in terms of the gameplay and mechanics, Skyrim is the greatest open world game.
It's hard to beat. Especially once they did the reskin and updated the graphics to the enhanced edition, and it's still a gorgeous game.
Indeed, it's still one of the best looking games I've ever played to this day.
I think for correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like one of the top soundtracks your list.
For me personally, it is my number one video game soundtrack of all time.
I mean, there's just something epic by you coming over a ridge and looking out onto the valley and hearing the main theme.
And that's just like
and,
one of many discussions we have about the music alone. But like the combat, there's so much variety in play styles in the combat. Whether you're playing like a completely busted mage build or doing the stealth archer classic, or if you're like me, where
and playing hard mode and play 2 melee without health potions.
I literally just play with like two-handed weapons, and I only use
interesting,
like
but
stockpiles of food and healing potions. But like, what the fascinating thing about Skyrim is when you like compare that dichotomy. The fact that both play styles can work just fine, because I've beaten the main story by using a build like that. So
right.
It just shows like how like versatile, I guess, the combat and play styles are in this game. The fact that like you can do all of that in the game.
Well, right, and the fact that it has some like balance issues and some of that stuff, it feels more endearing now than anything.
Especially with all the bugs in Skyrim.
They've gotten rid of anything.
And like the game crashing or like seeing enemies glitched or whatever the heck, or and the fact that it's like this giant meme of it being like Todd Howard's like vision or whatever. Like Todd Howard making a perfect game or whatever it is. It's like so many
call
memes
out to the spiffing bread or whatever, but
amazing YouTube channel, by the way.
And the fact that like you and I don't do it, but I know it's there. The whole modding community for this game is just
gosh.
yeah.
Have you played with any mods in Skyrim?
I have before, and I haven't like gone back and done it.
What kind of mod? Were they just like graphical improving mods, or were they ones that like
someone created like a whole elsewhere bit.
Because was it the Forgotten City, or have you heard of that before? I know that was a very famous like game that was based off a Skyrim mod.
No, but I think there was somebody that was doing a Skyrim mod where they were basically taking Oblivion and making it with.
I've heard of that too. I've heard they were doing the same thing with Morrowind. It's just like a ton of like crazy things.
Yeah,
I've heard of people that have made mods that like play Skyrim on phones or like have multiplayer.
I mean, it's
Skyrim. It's crazy mod community, and that's just a small part of the game. And like while the main story and like some of the quest lines may not be the best when compared to other open world games or even just video games in general, like the best thing about Skyrim, in my opinion, is just the straight up like immersion that you get. This feeling of just being in this fantasy world is just like something that's created by no other in terms of open world games by Skyrim. So I can understand why it's your number one, and that's why it's super high on my list too. But yeah, that's the entire list.
There you go.
You finally did it.
I did it.
It might change, but who cares? At least it's like time capsule for December 2023.
There you go.
Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Dad, did you enjoy recording these videos? I might have my dad come back for more videos. We'll just have to see like what kind of ideas I have, me or him have, or what he feels like recording or something like that.
Comment below. Like and subscribe and all of that stuff.
No. I don't do any of that.
You don't do any of that?
No, okay. I don't do any of that baloney because I literally just do this for fun. That's why I don't even edit these videos. But I mean,
fair enough.
If this video happens to get any comments at all, because it'll get like a grand total of maybe 20 or 30 views, if that.
Oh well, you never know.
I know. My most viewed video has 130 views. So
there you go.
It could be another success story like that. Yeah. But thank you guys for watching. This was a lot of fun to make, along with the other video where my dad gets smashed those characters. If you haven't watched it one yet, that was a great laugh. So yeah, definitely give that one a watch, and my dad will definitely be coming back for more videos. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.